Okay, sure. Josie Barnhart.
Here. She is on her way. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on is the approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
And I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes 2-0. The whole purpose of this committee meeting is to talk about the proposed legislative priorities. And what I had done is I had spoken to board members and central office staff, senior office staff, to compile a list of different things that they'd like to talk about in this committee, about different advocacy things that we could bring forth to the board. And so today we're going to go through these 12 different topics, and we are going to be, as committee members, Ms. Walker, and when Ms. Bradford gets here, we're going to be talking about some of the documentation we like to use to support that. Then we will prioritize our list of these and eliminate any that we want to see, potentially add in more that we discuss here today to be brought before the board, probably not June's meeting, but July's meeting. They will approve it, and then we will come back together as a legislative committee meeting and have the senior staff provide that documentation that we talk about today. And I think I had sent out the attachment of the recap of the legislative luncheon back in December. So some of those had kind of come from this list as well. And so then we'll have an opportunity to meet together again with the Tri-County area after our board has approved that, as well as talk about local day of advocacy with our county commissioners, as well as plan a state one. So that'll be the hopeful progression of this. So with that being said, we'll work our way. My idea is we'll work our way down this list, and the committee members will ask questions, give feedback, and central office staff can provide input about why some of these are the needs, and where they would also suggest input coming from, and then we can talk and rank them at the end. Does that sound good?
So they're not, may I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
They're not obviously currently ranked right now.
They are not ranked, no ma'am.
Okay, and we're trying to work out the ranking ourselves in this meeting.
Yes, I would like for the committee members to rank, and if there's anything that they'd like to strike from this list of 12, but how this list of 12 was compiled was reaching out to board members and senior staff to compile it. So, but this purely came from just the order that I received these. So this is not my own personal ranking, but that is where I'd like for the discussion to lie.
I must have missed the email, but there's a lot of things on here that I agree with, so that's
Okay,
good.
wonderful. Welcome, Ms. Bradford. And Ms. Bradford, you're going to see a proposed list of legislative priorities, and so at this time we're just going to go through and talk about them, where the justification came from, and then the committee members will ask questions about documentation that they'd like to see. There is currently no documentation provided for these different levels to advocate for, but the goal would be after the board presents it, we would come back together as a committee to gather that documentation and prepare. So the first one I'm going to skip because Dr. Faison is not here right now to talk, but the second one we can go into is this is the bullet point, opening dialogue about pre-K operations, logistics, and pros of how to support students through early intervention and data to set up of utilizing multiple programs. I know that's a long-winded one. We can come up with a better synopsis if we want to, but the thought process behind that was New Hanover County operates kind of like a universal system, utilizing multiple platforms with Head Start, NC Pre-K, and our local funding sources. And with that, we've seen a lot of different growth through how we enroll students, the supports provided, the cost for different things. And so to open dialogue with legislators, because I know there's conversations at a state level to potentially offer statewide pre-K.
So what are those conversations that you've heard?
So I think it's just an open conversation. So I think it's a unique opportunity for us to put our experts in front of some of our legislators. So that was the thought process behind this, and it kind of came out of the task force meeting that I was invited to, Ms. Walker. One of the things was talking about pre-K, and so what do we do well and the impact that it has on our students as well as performance. And so we can change what this bullet says, but if we wanted to have that dialogue really focusing on the benefits value add, and so I would see potentially data collection we would need for the pre-K, the 3 and 4-year-olds that we do serve, and how they're operating in kindergarten, first grade. You know, I don't know how many years back it goes, but the last 3 years, we've really expanded the opportunities here in New Hanover County for pre-K students. So maybe we could look at the last 3 years of data for our kindergarten and first graders to see where they are on level in comparison to statewide. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I have something to add to this because my first Hunt Institute meeting was all about early childhood, and I know there's a fiscal cliff getting ready to happen that could potentially really affect early childhood, and I don't believe that the legislature is going to fund any, because they're running out of ARPA funding. Dr. Faust may know about this, or some other folks here might know about it, and it's a concern because I don't know how that'll affect our program. I know there's already a wait list. I think there's like 300 kids on a wait list for our pre-K program. And with the task force, we've had a few kind of pre-K meetings to ask questions. We're really diving into it, but the same problems that we have, or issues, or concerns, is statewide as well. And I think what we do well is quality of care. I think our program is probably pretty top notch, and I think that's why folks want to get into it. Plus, I know it's different funding formulas with Head Start and see, like if a parent has to pay into it. Do any of our students have to pay anything to come to any of our programs? Okay, so that's one of the bonus areas for us having an early childhood program, as opposed to the private sites, which may or may not get some NC, I think, pre-K funding, and have to pay out of pocket. But the fiscal cliff that's coming by June 30th is going to be a concern. And I think that might be something we can talk to our legislators about. There's nothing we can do about it. Sadly, they're just not going to probably fund it or make up the ARPA funding.
Well, can I ask this question? As far as documentation, if we wanted to show support of the pre-K and advancement from a committee perspective, and please jump in, senior staff, what kind of documentation would we like to help present to share the value add that we're seeing in our community? That's where the conversation that I'd like to go with this on number 2 is to see what does that look like to share. So whether or not it happens, I agree with you, that's kind of out of our control, but what we can do is provide what documents,
I would also, with that one, like for us to have conversations with legislature about currently the pre-K system sits with DHSS versus the educational side. So it would be great to get a full understanding why it was moved over to the DHHS side versus staying on the educational side.
When did that happen?
I'm not sure what year that was, but that's where they sit there.
So I would like to see data provided, and I would just say maybe for the past 3 years. I think that's really when we expanded pre-K in the county. Are you shaking your head? So yes, I think that's right. So the last 3 years to look at our 3 and 4-year-olds for kindergarten and first grade. That would be to show the amount of the growth and on task. I know we also have early intervention with NTSS and potentially special ed too. So I think that those are the kind of documentation that we can provide support and share with our legislators to see the success that for our students. Yes, ma'am.
Could Ms. Walker talk more about the fiscal cliff that's coming? Because I'm not familiar with it, and I'd rather, if I'm not familiar, then the people watching aren't familiar. So if you could just talk us through some of that.
I will tell you, thank you for asking. I will tell you that was probably the biggest shocker for me attending this the conference about it, because I had no idea that this was going to happen. This is, I think, COVID-related funding, ARPA funding, just American Rescue Plan funding, that shored up the early childhood education component in all over the country, but it's running out. So that money's running out, and I think the figure I have, which I don't have it from, is the potential closure of like 1,500 centers over the state, and loss of like, gosh, I wish I had one. A lot of children that won't be able to attend early childhood. That, I don't have New Hanover statistics. Actually, I might actually write them an email asking if they know of New Hanover statistics specifically. But if some of these centers can't stay open, then that's a loss. Of course, how we deal with it, because we deal with like the NC Pre-K and the Head Start. We have our own kind of programs here. And plus, we're going to have a discussion next week about Head Start. I really don't know what's going to happen. One of the, we had the opportunity to speak to some early childhood folks that in Mecklenburg County that, have like private centers and that. They're very, very concerned, and they're worried about the workforce because childcare is very expensive for working folks. And, our program, it doesn't cost anything, but we only have a limited number of spots, and space.
And we're cutting back anyway,
Yeah.
by 2 classrooms minimum.
Unfortunately, we don't know whether we have that or not. That's in our grant, our grant ask, I think. And I think I was talking earlier to Ms. Barnhart about that, like, just things aren't fun, things don't cost the same as they did a year ago, last year, 2 years ago. So if the county is funding 12 classrooms and they think it's 12, it's not 12 anymore, it's like 10. So, and that's just the unfortunate of it. Everything costs more. Salaries cost more, everything else costs more. So, I mean, I think for us in our district, that's $218,000 we would hope that they would help shore up to keep 12.
Yeah.
But you were talking about how they might spread that around.
The students, to spread the students around, so we could still serve the students and just in the 10 classroom versus 12.
Yeah, so yeah, this is a legislative committee, and so I guess talking about the loss of the ARPA funding is going to affect childhood, but we don't really know how quickly it'll affect it and what it's going to really look like. They just think the potential for 1,500 sites to close, and it's a lot of students that won't get served. And so as a public school district, we have to wonder, because I support early education, I'm sure most people do, because when they come into kindergarten ready, then they're on a path of success by the time they get to 3rd grade, because that's when they judge.
Exactly, and so that's why I was saying if we wanted to see data from the last 3 years and look at kindergarten and 1st grade and maybe 2nd grade data growth, I think another thing that we could highlight would be NTSS, how many of these students are identified and have interventions given to them as a 3 and 4-year-old, and how that translates to helping them in kindergarten and 1st grade. I think those would be the data trends that would be the value add, in my opinion, of the quality program that we currently have,
Yeah.
and to share with legislators the success that we're seeing with our younger, I think that would be beneficial.
So to that point, one of the discussions that we've been having in the task force pre-K meetings are, what does that look like? If we have kids in our pre-K program, do they all go to kindergarten here or not? Do they? I don't know that they do. I mean, because that's what we're asking right now. I think we had a meeting last week asking about kindergarten readiness, how that is tested in our kindergarten class, before our kids come in. Is it uniform? I don't think it's the same for every school. And it might depend on the teacher that's asking. Because I know when my kids went, they assess them, right? They find out, they have like a list of things. And Julie, I'm not sure if this is under you or not, what they normally ask a child when they come in, right? Colors, number, like what is the assessment of what readiness looks like?
For kindergarten.
Yeah, for kindergarten.
And so the special ed kids, they were coming with an IEP.
Right.
But then the
But for a traditional student.
traditional, that's Patrice. So
Okay.
they, because there are
That's
2
Patrice.
types of kids that are in there, so you'll have both.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah, because I think we did look at some data last week, and we just weren't sure if it was consistent across all the schools, asking these readiness questions with students that were coming in. But if we were going to make a list of talking about quality of our pre-K program, we'd have to find out how many of those students came from our pre-K classes.
Right. That's what I'm saying with the 3 years, so thank you for that clarification. I'd like to look at the last 3 years of students in our pre-K 3 and 4-year-old program and look at the trends from kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, and see how that translates to how they're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Maybe it's just purely kindergarten we look at. Maybe it's if the committee thinks that's a smarter move to look at straight from pre-K into kindergarten and do that. I mean, I'm fine with that. I would like, if this ends up being our legislative agenda adopted by the board, what I'd like to do is give direction to senior staff to help us compile the quality talking points that we need when we are talking to our legislators about this. And that's what we're hashing out
So
here, I
that,
guess.
this speaks to the quality of our pre-K program
Yes.
as students go from our pre-K program into
Yes.
our kindergarten. But there's also obviously arguments can be made for early childhood education period too. Like we wanted to add those statistics in there. you
Yeah,
know.
I'd like to know them.
Yeah.
And I have a question for her, and then I have a comment. And you have heard that this fiscal cliff is coming this summer and this
June 30th
legislator session?
With the budget, yeah.
June 30th.
June 30th is the end of the budget year, and that's when
One
it's,
month away.
yeah, it's, and we had, at the NHCS, we had a couple legislators in there, and one was like, it's just not gonna happen. They're not gonna shore up that money. That's what he said, so he would know, he would know as a legislator, he would know. But, you know, going back to the point about like the value, we were talking about quality, we were talking about value. They have models out here, and I can share this with you, with the committee if you want, about, I know I hate to even put it in these terms, although sometimes we talk about return on investment. It talks about, you know, how much it's worth, early childhood education. It says, it's a Heckman curve model, and it says for every dollar spent on high-quality birth to 5 programs for disadvantaged children, taxpayers expect a 13% annual return on investment. I think those are good arguments, you know, for saying we really want to shore up, pre-K operations, logistic pros, how to support students do. It's just it's a win-win to have a program or have students in the program, even though we don't have the data right now that proves that. Anything you can do earlier, the better, is going to show.
Well, and I think Ms. Smiles and Dr. Cook would also be able to
Yeah.
pull that data for us. I think we do have it. I think just aggregating it in a way that's giving us talking point, I think that's great. So maybe adding to the list, breaking up by socioeconomic class to see the growth of being on level. I'm going to put that in my notes as well. So if we look at the next point to consider is replicating the RISE program in traditional high schools. Specifically in regards to chronic absenteeism and increasing graduation rates. This is something I think that's unique to our community, that we have an opportunity to advocate for New Hanover County Schools. It's at New Hanover High School currently. And Ms. Mason was actually able to join me. We observed an entire day in the RISE program, and we got to speak with these individuals who are working with our students. And they said the amount of intentionality that they see with these kids and the amount of growth is phenomenal. And I know Abby's on maternity leave, but she sent me all of her data to show how they identify students, how the growth with it. And when you talk about two things, and the 2 points that I put in here is chronic absenteeism and increased graduation rates. And I think that's something that at the state level is a big push that they have been acknowledging and considering. We want our students to be successful, and being absent at school definitely leads to an increased dropout rate. And so this is, I think, a unique program that we can help advocate for, and I think it would be a benefit and value add to our 4 high schools. And so that was
I have
just
a
something to
question, Ms.
consider.
Barnhart.
Yes, ma'am.
How much because it all comes down to money in the end, how much does this program cost? I mean, I'm sure they'll support it, especially if there's money involved. Like, that is the question we would be asking them for, right?
So it was 3 teachers and 2 TAs. So, yes, do you have a number?
Well, I was just going to clarify that all of our high schools for services, especially for students with disabilities, are allotted in alignment with the amount of students they have and the amount of service delivery minutes they have. So this is, and every high school also creates their own master schedule based on their unique student needs. So Hanover, New Hanover High School chose to schedule their particular allotted staff in this way, and it is a good option. It did not create or require additional resources than were provided to the school. It's a scheduling option.
Is this good? So that would be a local thing that we would.
Right.
Okay. So maybe this is not the best one of those. The 4th thing was, when I was volunteering with Ms. Crable with the CTE, it was our 8th graders that they had brought out for the Be Pro, Be Proud truck, and the Wilmington Home Builders Associations were out there. And I had a conversation with the president of the Home Builders Association, and he is on a large scale advocating for a Be Pro, Be Proud truck specifically for the southeastern region. Currently, the state has funded, and they fund people that go along with these trucks. And what happens is these trucks go all over the state of North Carolina, and these kids get to have hands-on experiences. They have a truck driver capability. They have, I helped with welding. What forklift? Forklift was one. I helped with welding, which was very fun to do. But they get to really have some interaction about different potential skill sets. And the whole idea is beyond having exposure to these opportunities. And so this was something that he would like to see one specifically in the southeastern region, which we would be one of 9 to be the beneficiary of. And so if that's something that we as a board would like to consider input and supporting, that's just brought to the attention. I think it was about $2 million to have these trucks created and be booked out. And talking with DeMarcus and Mandy, these trucks get booked out literally like 2 years in advance. So if you're not on the calendar, they're not coming to your school district because they're so sought after to have that hands-on experience. So
I have
something
a
to
question.
consider.
I have a
Yes.
follow-up. So the Home Builders Association is the one that sponsored this last one?
Yes.
Okay, and
So-
if the $2 million ask was for us to have, I mean, if the district to have our own, who would be in charge?
It would not be the district in charge. It would operate the same way as currently how the Be Pro, Be Proud trucks are, but rather than traveling all over the state, this truck would target these 9 areas.
Okay.
And so they would have, just like how they currently have people operating the trucks now, same format and model. They would go through, I think, a similar booking process, but the availability would be a lot more flexible to meet the needs of our students and surrounding areas.
So it serviced 9 rather than 115.
Yes, ma'am. And so what I would say as far as documentation, if we wanted to support this, we would just reach out to the home builders asking for a letter of support that the board could also sign to have in favor of this.
So what would we do? We would just advocate for
It would
it?
just be,
Yeah.
sharing that with our legislators that we would support an increase of this. So
Just
that,
support.
I mean, this is, some of these are pretty, I feel like more straightforward than the other ones. But that would be my recommendation, is if we wanted to do that, to reach out and have documentation and collaborate with the Home Builders Association, just saying, supporting that
So
effort.
what would, so, I mean, I'm on board for support for sure, but what would they need from us? Data on anything particularly that the district can give them in support for their lobbying to get?
That might be something, the CTE value add. I mean, maybe we can get with Mandy and DeMarcus to see if there's anything that maybe they can bring in support in addition beyond that, but that would be,
Okay, so we want to give support, and we want to figure out how to give that support with data that maybe shows a benefit. Does that make sense?
or maybe a letter of intent. I know they were out there with our 8th graders, and they've been out there for career fair. They weren't there at this year's career fair, but last year they were. And so, yeah, so maybe a letter of intent to see like the amount of students that we're servicing. Is that what you're kind of thinking? The
Yeah,
amount of
you said
students that we're
value
servicing?
add, so I guess whatever we can show as a value add. And you said there's 9, it would be 9 regions, perhaps coordinating with the other regions to do
Yeah,
support.
I definitely see if this is something that our board passes, I see this bringing back to when we come together with Brunswick and Pender again to say, hey, can we, and can we all come together and say, we'd like to support this and this is what data we're going to get?
Yeah, so support from just New Hanover, but support from all would be
Yeah.
a bigger, would get noticed.
And I can, I'm happy to talk to the Home Builders Association and say that too. If there's, the 9 districts that they're targeting, if there's some collaboration that we can do on a collective level, that would be good.
Yeah.
So that was that one. This next one was talking about the allotment formula change. This is a huge discussion. And so I think we're all in agreement that we'd like to see an allotment change. And that's not the issue. And Dr. Barnes, I know that you and I had exchanged with this, but just emphasizing some non-instructional support allotments from the state. And so if you wanted to kind of elaborate some of, I know we could go on for hours, so just short and kind of truncated, but if you want to take it over. But please don't.
So quickly, there are some places in the allotment formula where I think in the last decade, students' needs have changed, whether the allotment formula or not. The two areas I would focus attention in the greatest detail are non-instructional support, which is a catch-all that contains counselors, social workers, media coordinators, instructional coaches. And when you have a formula that sort of collects them all together and only gives you one for every 400 students you have, the burden it puts on a local district finances that you're kind of commissioning to fund is sort of excessive, because obviously you want every school to have a counselor, a media coordinator, an instructional coach, and a social worker. To do that, you have to have a school with 1,600 kids.
Now, that would be my follow-up question to you, Dr. Barnes, is that's how the allotment formula works, right? It goes by how many students are in that particular school.
Right.
And right. No, I was just, no, you go ahead.
The other place I think is where it sort of showcases the concern. We all know how valuable assistant principals are to the day-to-day operations of the school. They're utility players. They can operate as a principal, they can operate as a counselor, they find themselves in social work, they do a lot of different work. Right now, even a high school as large as Laney and Hanover would only be allotted 2 10-month principals for their entire school. Some of our elementary schools would have 2 or 3 months of an assistant principal. The formula is flawed in my estimation for what schools do. So the current formula for assistant principals is 1 month of an AP salary for every 98.53 kids that are in a school. And of course, we have to maneuver that to a formula that puts people to, you can't have assistant principal in 5 different schools per month. So we sort of have our own formula to sort of equate that, but we actually do more assistant principals locally than the state funds itself because of the needs.
Well, there you go. I think you just hit the nail on the head about needs. I think that's what I talk about too, because I'm looking at the sheet that y'all gave us for state allotments. Snipes has 2 right now, which they definitely need, in my opinion, but the state allots 0.31. I don't know how that works, where you just don't even allot for one whole person. I mean, but I don't know if you can. With the high, but my point about the needs part, and I'm kind of working on something that would, well, at least for the task force purposes, to look at how you judge a school's needs. You know, I would look at absenteeism, I would look at IEPs, I would look at lots of things to just see, like, because if you cut that from Snipes as opposed to a school that's not, you know, that's doing really well, it's different, right? Because the needs of the students are more services or more interventions or whatever, you know.
And we look at that in our local formula
Right.
for things like barn schools and things like that, but the question should be, how should we have to, because kids have needs, principals have needs, but you also have to think about the day-to-day operations of things like evaluations, teacher observations that are required. And you get a school that's fairly large, that principal is running all day long. So those are just 2 areas that I think, if you were going to say, what are the most concerning areas, those are the 2 that I think we focus on first.
And so committee members, what I'd ask for us to discuss is looking at those and hearing that, obviously, my first question to you, Dr. Barnes, would be, you know, what is that magic number? Not putting you on the spot right now, but really to kind of hone in to say, what does that look like? If we're saying we'd like to see it change, and here's where it's at, where would we like to see it go? And probably there's going to be some, you know, middle meeting of the conversation. But I think, one, to have some target focus that we'd like to hit, that we'd like to be closer to, is important for us to know, to equip us as elected officials to know. But then also, I'd like to see some of the value add that we have by having these in our building that we can share with our, and maybe it is targeting priority schools and saying, look, we have 2 assistant principals here and this, we're seeing this growth, and like that kind of thing, that we can share with that. What else? Yes.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on that. It would be helpful to me, and I'm just to bring it down, if you would give us just those two areas maybe, and then a target number, but if you'd give us the talking points that you just went through, in a bulleted form, then we can talk intelligently and actually hand them something. Because I found with legislation, if you hand them something, it makes all the difference in the world. And then the other thing that was so successful for us last year is if we have that target number, and then if we know the number of students that would affect, we divide that number, and it's negligible money. It seems to be help them make their minds up. So if we could have that, then we can work that for you.
And of course, what I've given you before is too much probably to share in a brief meeting.
But we need to
I
understand it.
can scale it down, sure.
Yeah, we need to understand it to the point where we can talk about it. And I am not at the point where I can. I can just say the formula's off and it needs to change, and I want to get more articulate on this.
Sure. I think another voice would be to bring some voices into the conversation, right? So bring educators who are experienced enough to know what this formula affects on a day-to-day and have them be part of the conversation.
And Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me tag on to that. I have just been, for whatever reason, fixated on the opportunity scholarships because I really feel like there's a cliff, and we don't know there's a cliff, but I feel like there's a cliff. And I have been trying to get the state to give me the number of students from Hanover County, families that have applied for opportunity scholarships. And the state keeps telling me that we have that information, but we're not going to give it to you. We'll release it in the fall. So for some reason, they're sitting on that number. But in the meantime, and I'll send it to other board members, I didn't do it, they sent me an email with last year's statistics in it. And it was roughly 300 students, and like $1.23 million came out of the money for the previous year. But we know we went from, I don't know, a negligible number around the state to 72,000 applications. And I really believe it's going to change the way things are going to happen, and therefore the whole funding formula is affected by that too. So it comes into that argument in terms of, for me. And I'm probably going to make a public records request, see if I can get the new Hanover number sooner than fall, because I really want to know. But in the meantime, I've got some Excel spreadsheets they sent me and pretty graphs, and you click on our county and so on, so I will share that around.
Yeah, I think we can look at that.
I'd rather know the base now, which I hadn't thought to ask for, so we'll know what we're doing now, so that when we see what the future is, we'll know how big a cliff is.
So
Oh, one more point. In studying that Excel spreadsheet, the shocking thing for me was currently what's out there now. The kids are coming out of this year, they were on opportunity scholarships. It's mostly stacked in the lower grades. And I could come up with some suppositions as to why, sports maybe, but it is stacked in the littler people, which is an interesting fact I didn't expect. So there's all kinds of data you can pick up out of that stuff. So I will share it.
So
Ms.
to
Walker?
your point, thank you, Ms. Barnes. I know when the governor was here last time, he did do a speech on it, and Dr. Faust was there as well. And I think I don't know where he got his data from. I know he's got a page that probably links it somewhere. He says to New Hanover County, $1.8 million will be out of our district because of
It
opportunity
has to be more
scholarships.
than that because we were at 1.27.
Well, they just expanded it, I know,
Yeah,
a couple
that's
weeks
way more than
ago. I think the way the bill was worded, it's $4 billion over 10 years, but then it works in 4 tiers, and the 2 tiers are, based on income. And so they approved more for the higher tiers to fund the wealthier parents. So I think his opinion was, or wherever he got his stats from, was 1.8 million that would come out of our school budget for that. But yeah, I would love to see, the statistics on it too, as soon as they release them. But I have a follow-up about the allotment
Yes,
discussion.
please.
And I know you're going to give us some stuff, but the formula, I know it's based on student population. I guess if we were going to advocate too, I would say, could you just fund a whole person? Because I'm looking at the Gregory one. There we'd fund 0.09 of an AP, but we have a whole person. And so we locally have to make up those funds, is that correct? I would just like to even get to the one person. And that's across the board here. I'm looking at middle and high schools. Laney's 1.91 person, but we have 4. I would think that is what we feel is adequate for Laney at this time. But that was a question that was just asked from Ms. Barnhart. What do you feel is the adequate, AP level for,
I can give you sort of what I was thinking, what the target would be, or how much that costs us locally.
yeah.
That's no problem. I've got tons.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't like the allotment formula at all, but this is also part of the confines that we're dealing with here, is if we're utilizing an allotment formula, I agree that the allotment formula is off. Personally, I would rather see us start with the child, and if we have a check mark, a different cost amount that you're getting support, if they are lower socioeconomic, if they are identified as AAG, if they are identified as EC. That's my personal, I would love that in more comparison, but the reality is, looking at this box that we are confined into, we have to, it's a great idea to talk about that, in my opinion, to talk about saying, if we just uproot the entire model of how we do it, but the odds and chance of that happening are less likely. So then we're looking at the allotment formula and trying to better advocate utilizing that system. So, but that's my 2 cents with that.
Yeah.
So, I agree. So I wrote down the funding, talking about funding person or position, not just a part-time, and having a roundtable discussion to potentially bring in some of our educators. But then we're going to need some of this documentation, committee members. And so what I think that we should be looking at is maybe some of the things when you're looking at social workers and instructional coaches, counselors, maybe the referral process, and to see the uptick in that. And so that would be a great data point that we could share to see with our legislators, that we could say, this is the uptick that we're seeing, therefore the ratio should be, if we're looking based on the needs, then we should be looking at this checklist of things that we're seeing a need based on this, not just an idea. It's good to have the counselor, not just the idea, but to say we need to be responsive to the needs, and we've seen a huge uptick in referrals and needs, and I think that would be a good way to show our legislators.
And just to make sure I'm clear, that is not the only concern we have.
Yeah.
We give you 2 examples of the concerns.
Mhm.
I don't want people to say, what about classroom users? We don't care about that and that sort of thing. That's not the case at all. The other problem with the allotment formula is they'll say, we'll give you 1 high school teacher for 10, 11, and 12 grade for every 29 students.
Mm.
But they don't fund any classes in enrichment. They don't fund, so you have to sort of rob here to take all of those cases as well, which are what makes the class sizes so dynamic and critical in high school. So there's, you need a master's degree to understand the TA formula that they use for K1, 2, 3. So there are significant issues throughout the formula. I just gave you a couple of examples.
I agree, and I think too, with our COVID dollars, a lot of them going into these support positions, I think we will be able to provide some good data to say we had the opportunity with this funding, and this is how we utilized it, and this is the value add that we saw in our district, and bringing it to the table to understand that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Can I just add one more comment?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
because I've been, paying attention to the news too. What we're going through in Hanover is there's a lot of counties going through this as well. I just read that Durham teachers are wanting our county to fund more, and our commissioners are feeling it. And I know they're upset about it, and I know that they feel like they do a lot, and they do. It's just weird having to rely more on local funding because the state does not provide enough. I don't think. I'll just say it's my opinion because I don't want to get in trouble about that. But I think the legislators need to understand that. And I don't know, maybe they do. And
Well, and I appreciate you bringing it. I think that was the whole point. I mean, I know this was a new committee last year coming into to help create this dialogue. And creating the dialogue is, if you're 3 levels removed, it's really easy to not see it as a constant problem. But we are very much in it. You guys are very much in it. And so it's really we are that door. We're creating that opportunity of saying, here's where we're at, and we're doing great stuff, and we support our staff. And we're also saying that we want to continue to do it in this manner. And so that's what we're trying to do. So, I mean, I agree with you. I think that, different people have different passions, as you get on the state level for things. But I think that, I know the 3 of us are passionate about trying to do a better job communicating, open that door. So that's why we're here, and we're going to continue to do that, knowing that steps in the right direction does not make it perfect. And we're going to continue to do that.
Yeah. And I'll just say at the end of it all, it's how we service our students and what kind of service and quality we want to give our students
Yeah.
in our school district. So, You can put it like that.
Yeah, and so number 6 is just an acknowledgement. I know the state really had emphasized beginning salaries of teachers, but with that, it came to kind of a halt for 15 to 25-year-olds. Currently, there's not a raise built in, so just an advocacy of that. Any further questions, committee members, of that? I feel like that one's pretty self-explanatory. You want to explain?
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
okay.
If I could just add one thing, I'm sorry. The other part that I think is a real concern is looking at the scoring master's pay. For years and years, teachers received a different salary if they went back to school and honed their craft or expanded their knowledge. It's great to work on the beginning teacher salary, but that 15 to 25 plus the master's degree, which is when most teachers would get that, is a double hit for that vote, for those people in that group. And I understand in the past, sort of like, you have company coming over, so you clean up your house by putting everything in the closet under the bed. Raising the beginning teacher salary helps address the teacher salary issue, but it doesn't fix the problem, which really is the fact that there's a 10 years period of time where teachers go into a plateau on their salary. And now that teachers are looking at other options, teachers are leaving the classroom to go into the private sector, we're losing a lot more of those middle of the career teachers that we do. Beginning teachers still obviously a concern. Teacher salary in the beginning obviously is something to look at, but bringing that plateau and looking at master's pay are two very critical issues that I think all educators agree.
May I ask, may I ask this question? There is an incentive for nationally board certified staff, though. I believe it's a hefty incentive.
There's a 12% increase of, I think it is 12% increase for people with national board certification, but a master's degree and national board are two different.
I agree. I knew that there was an increase or something. I just wanted to verify what it was. Yes, Ms. Walker?
So just adding to this conversation, and then this is again from the governor when he came, he gave the statistic. Was it North Carolina is the most board certified teachers in the country? That was his statistic he gave. I think I looked it up on his page and it looks accurate, but we have some very educated staff that probably don't get the pay they deserve. And the NEA report that came out said that we're like 38th in the nation on average teacher salary, which is a shame. We've got some of the most educated teachers in the country, but they're not getting paid the way they should. That's part of the problem too, because you talk about master's pay, you talk about a lot of the other pipelines that have kind of been taken away from teachers. The problem is that it hurts morale and they're going to go somewhere else, or they're going to figure out a way to get paid what they're worth, if that makes sense. And our legislators have a lot to do with that. I think they can make decisions like restoring master's pay. They can make these decisions that help our schools stay strong. And New Hanover County has a lot too. I don't know, Dr. Kosh, if you know the statistic on that or not. In New Hanover County, I think has.
I don't, but what I was going to jump in with you on is that, and what Dr. Barnes is saying, so the current teacher salary starts at just base pay. This is not with the local. It's 39, so there are raises, $84, whatever. And then you get to year 15, and it's 53.6, all the way to year 24. You make the same amount of money on the base. So if you're in a district where they may give $100 for local, that's all you're getting. But that's what he's saying through those years of 15 through 25. And so individuals are saying, why do I have to get national boards? Why do I have to get a master's degree? Why don't you value me for the work that I do? But for 10 years, I make the same amount of money. And if I don't have a local funding to support that, I make nothing. So out of those, you think about those 9, our region, which are 9, the pay, not everyone can give an additional $10,000 or $8,500 to supplement those pay. But you're right. It shouldn't. If you value the work, then why don't you just value the work? And Yeah, so it becomes frustrating for them. And so again, you're right, the state has a lot of national board certified teachers. And I do believe that and this is just my own my own synopsis, or not synopsis, but my own research, is that when the state stopped giving the 10% increase for masters, that more teachers went for national board. I don't know that. I've not done any qualitative study, but it's like they're finding money. But then it's like, but then you have now, we're fighting with the business, the corporate America. Who's like, oh, 53,000? Yeah, we can meet, I'll start you at 70. And so there's no way for us to compete against that. But again, if everyone says that education is, what's going to carry this nation or carry this state, then actually I think they should actually say, let's pay teachers. One of the things that often happens, and we do this, we look at different states, where they will start teachers at 60,000, but then in year 5, you're making 61, or 62 at year 10. And it's like, well, how is the person coming in at 60 and then I'm just like, I've been here 15 years or 10 years and I only get 2. So it needs to be overhauled. They really and truly need to rethink, relook, and I think that's where we need to just really talk to our legislatures, because again, I get to see our district and I get to hear, but I sit with 8 other superintendents who hear. So when you think about Sampson County and you think about Clinton City schools, those are school districts that don't, or Craven County, they look a lot different than our school district. So yeah,
Can I add to that, Dr. Faust? Like our out of our region, we're probably the wealthiest county district, and we get the benefit of a local supplement. They don't have the tax base for that. They don't have the resources for that.
Right.
So it's tough to compete like that. And like I say, what is our local supplement? The county gives.
So actually, it's actually, Chris, I think we go up to 10.
If you break it down in 2 different areas, we have a hard to fill supplement and a regular supplement. And we're benefited, I think, significantly. I think we recognize the county commissioners. We put more than $20 million a year into our teacher supplement schedule.
Yeah.
And that's, we're able to do that. But we also are able to scale that by experience. So we do provide you a larger supplement as long as you work here. It starts at the very bottom that you get is $7,000, the very top you get is 12. And that's in addition to your base salary. So I think that it's one of those areas where, and we can talk about, we have pension, we can talk about the benefits of being a school system employee, but I think at the end of the day, you can't disregard that 10-year plateau.
Yeah. Ms. Bradford, did you have anything you wanted to add to this one?
Well, and I just agree with Dr. Barnes. What he's saying is, if the people I've employed over the years got no increase for 10 years, from the 15-year mark, I mean, when you've had an employee for 15 years, you've invested in them a great deal, and holding on to them at that point is enormously beneficial. So and then 20 years and 25 years. I mean, I just was watching last week's county commission meeting that as the people were retiring, no one stays that long anymore, and part of it is because there's no carrot out there. If I stay 2 more years, I'm going to get a raise. It's just essential to hold on to your personnel, and just the training you have to put into the new person or the 5-year person versus the no training at 20 years, unless you're retraining, it's invaluable. I can't believe that the state sticks us with that.
Right.
I do want to make a clarification, I'm sorry. There is a difference between a cost of living adjustment versus a move down the salary schedule. Moving down the salary schedule is what we're talking about. When we do a cost of living adjustment, the entire scale moves itself up. But that is separate from, that's an expected, that's normal. This is about raise.
Yeah, COLA's just keeping you up with the cost of bacon.
Oh, no.
You and bacon.
Have you
Yeah,
seen how
so
expensive it is?
maybe that could be something to look at, is the percentage of staff that we have that are 15 years or higher.
that's a good
And
one.
so that could be the data of sharing that, of just, in addition to the concern it obviously raises, but just sharing how that affects our staff. Because, everybody's in competition with the teachers and educators and admin that we have, and acknowledging that we have a very small population in this bubble of 15 years or higher would be a good thing to show them. So kind of moving on, increase lottery funding for school renovation and repair. I know in just short conversation with Eddie, just advocating for a higher percentage of lottery funding to be involved in capital. And again, Mr. Anderson, I would throw that to you to see what you would think the ideal, you don't have to have the answer right now, but the ideal percentage number would be, but that we can advocate for.
So just a brief history. Prior to the education lottery, there was a corporate sales tax. We received about $2.5 million from that corporate sales tax that went to school renovation and repair in Hanover County. Education lottery was passed.
Excuse me.
We received about $2.5 million in lottery funds for construction, repair, and renovations. So there was about a 4-year period there where we received both. Corporate sales tax went away. So when people say, well, we have all this lottery,
There was no
we
increase.
don't. I mean, we had both for a little while. Corporate sales tax went away. We were back to last year, 48% of the lottery was used for school construction, and the other uses, school staff, pre-K, scholarships, grants, and transportation. So if the legislature can find other ways to fund these things, commit more dollars to school construction, that would be great.
Can I ask Eddie a follow-up question?
Yes, ma'am.
So how do they decide, as I know we bid a project, hoped to get lottery funding, but we didn't get approved. Was that because of the wealth in our county? Like, how does the state decide where the money goes and what percentage, and who would get the money before another one?
It's based on lottery revenue that's generated, and then also your for your county.
Okay. They don't look at it, like, say, if we bid a project, or we ask the lottery for funds to build a project or whatever, why would we get picked over someone else? Was it based
You
on,
get money first, and then you submit your project after
Okay.
you know your money. So they don't evaluate the project and then determine how much money they do it the other way.
okay,
So it's based on ADM then, you said. So what we would need to be discussing is the increased amount of ADM so that we would have an increased amount of capital then, or total percentage? Because you were saying 48% of the lottery funding was for school construction, but we get our funding based on the ADM. So,
I think that the ADM is fine, that if the legislature could find ways to fund the other things, there's school staffing, pre-K, maybe that ties into the allotment formula as well. I don't think school transportation was ever intended to be paid out of lottery funds.
And I'll just add to the history piece of this. So when the lottery was first passed, we weren't using any of that money for pre-K and teacher salaries. The lottery was passed, and then I think we had, was that 2013, Cliff, while there was a financial recession, a couple of years after that was passed, and how the state balanced their budget was able to some of these expenses to lottery.
So, go ahead.
well, I'm just looking at the lottery website. It says it funds pre-K, school construction, college scholarships and grants, school staff, needs-based school construction, and school transportation. That's what it says, but,
Yeah, that's
Just
what
for
I'm
people out
looking
there.
at that as well.
just for people out there that are listening. But it is interesting how they formulate that.
So, my questions are for Mr. Anderson. So, just to walk you back through what you said, we got construction money from the corporate sales tax, and it was about $2.5 million. And then they replaced that with the lottery money, but the money's the same, so it's pretty much a wash. We didn't get an increase over where we were. And then, as Ms. Sutton said, then when they got into a budgetary thing, they added all these other expenses that are now coming out of the lottery fund. So there's basically probably not a whole lot of money left over. And you're saying have them fund those other services and keep the lottery for just school construction. Okay.
The number 8 was an increased CEP meal incentive program. I don't see this being, I see this being very in line with what the board currently does. We just approved 7-0 about school meals for all. I know that the state has increased the community eligibility program funding for school lunch and breakfast. And so just to continue that path, I mean, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The board already has a document stating that we support that. We can show the data of, you know, what's the benefit value add, because I know everything that doesn't get covered, we have to cover in local funding, like, because we're not going to not let a kid eat. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Ladies, if I'm overstepping, let me know. Any questions, concerns about that? It brings us to 9, the EC funding formula rollout. Ms. Farnham, if you wanted to elaborate a little bit on that.
Yes, the funding formula has been studied over the past couple of years, and our request, of course, is for that revision and enhancement of state funding for students with disabilities, and it's specifically for students who are eligible under IDEA that have IEPs, individualized education programs. So part of that would be removal of the current 13% funding cap. Right now we are at the state funding limit of 13%, so you can't have more than, you can't be funded for more than 13% of your population of students having IEPs. The funding formula doesn't specifically say you'll get nothing beyond 13%, but you won't get the per child allotment. And that funding formula, and by the way, we are tipping toward 14% in the district. We've seen an increase over time, especially in the last 5 years. This new weighted formula reflects the differentiated costs of serving students with disabilities, and that would really be impactful for us, especially for the number of students we have with complex medical needs. We have many students who require personalized services, medical services, to be able to be safe in school on a full day. And this year we had a record number of students requiring one-on-one RNs. They're only nurse, so they don't receive the services, those one-on-one services from the school nurse. They have they're in a school with a school nurse, but they have a nurse solely to themselves because of their life-threatening needs. And of course, we know that that's a really high cost. That's not a question in whether it's provided, it's a question in how we balance and put the puzzle pieces together. This funding formula generates funding based on weights applied to service levels. It would incorporate the number of students with a lesser level of service, a lesser amount of service. It basically pulls in the data from each child's individualized education program, where they have their own team that meets, including their parent, to determine their levels of need. And currently, the funding formula from the state is based on a fixed head count or child count. So this would be way more advanced. And it also would align with how we know our staff need to be allotted in the district. So here in New Hanover County, we allot our staff not based on a ratio. We allot our staff to schools based on the differentiated needs of students. Mm-hmm. So we are the middleman that tries to make the formula right. It is going to be really helpful if the state formula matches that. And then I also want to reiterate, this isn't for state advocacy, but for federal advocacy. Mm-hmm. So all of our services for students with disabilities and all of the requirements of their IEPs are based on IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which was enacted by Congress. So that's our federal regulation. The very regulation that explains to us all of the due process and procedural safeguards for serving our students with disabilities that has all of the vast layers of regulations and requirements, that same legislation or regulation says that Congress will fund 40% of what it takes to implement these services. And historically, and especially over the past 25 years, Congress has provided 15% of the funds. So we're not funded adequately at the federal level, which then puts more burden on the state level, which then puts more burden on the local level, because the regulations in IDEA did not adjust when all of the federal funding didn't come. The federal funding never has followed the regulations. So, but Dr. Faust and I are not allowed. So when we submit our federal projects, we have to acknowledge that we will not lobby for additional federal funds. But it doesn't mean we can't educate our community about the need for additional federal funds to serve our students with disabilities.
They can lobby.
Yeah. This is really interesting. Could you give us, I know your schedule's just really full, but could you give us some talking points on those, about the, the 40% down to 15%? Could you give us that? Because
Absolutely.
I can meddle around in there.
Absolutely. I'll provide that in a board memo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just have a follow-up. So if the federal doesn't fund it properly and there's a cap, that comes from local funds, yes?
Yes.
Good old
Yes.
local.
Yes.
Yeah, and there you go. And I feel it's a shame that, and look, we don't know everything as board members. Commissioners can't know everything either. That's why they have experts like you guys, to help us understand it. But I feel like if they understood that, they would, because we as a board get blamed a lot for our budget and whatever, and it's just like, it's very complicated. It's not as simple as saying, we spent COVID funding this way or that way, or, this fiscal cliff with the it's just, I think if anything, what COVID did was showed us probably what we needed to do and what was required more than anything. And I think we realized that the help that we got from that was good and is what we needed. So if we're, okay, because this is the follow-up. I just had a comment, but this is the follow-up. So they're supposed to fund at 40% in the federal government, right? And they only do 15. But then we are required by law to service students in a particular way. And so if we can't or don't, based on funding, we get in trouble. Is that true?
We have to.
Yeah.
But we have to, that's what I'm saying.
Right, so we've never even given it a thought to not.
Right.
Because they will, then there's lawsuits in
Exactly.
addition to freezing dollars.
So I was just making the bigger point of,
Yeah.
they expect it from us. So that means the commissioners have more of a burden since the school district doesn't create funds. So, and we don't have taxing authority. So we have to say, hey, can you give us more money because we have to do things.
Well, I think this is also an opportunity that we can work with our county commissioners, say, hey, these are
facts.
40, we are getting 15% federally, and we're supposed to be getting closer to 40. So this could be a way that we could collaborate with them on a bigger level of government entity, federal government, and saying, hey, can we work towards what we're supposed to be doing? This one.
I think that we really need some education here, because coming into this, I had no idea. And I think most people are going to be like me, and I'm talking about our legislators. They remember school when they were in school, and you have it fixed in your head, this is what school's like. And no one got personalized medical services when I was a kid. They just stayed home, or they were somewhere else. No one had a nurse with them all day long. And this differential needs as the students' needs, I think if we did a better job of educating and, I don't know, almost like, the little videos that we put out for this is what we do in our school district, something like that. Did you know that these are the services that are going on in our schools?
So maybe that could be
Because I
part
really
of
think
the
that
documentation.
that would at the local level, because I'm sure, and then I think about our state representatives, our federal representatives. I know that probably Senator Davis doesn't know about this, and they're going to all want, a talking point sheet when you show up. But I just think that because you live it, and you've been living it the whole time, it's been like the frog in the pot. But when I walked in, I was like, we do what? Really? I didn't know that. And I bet 95% of the people that we need to talk to don't know the kind of level of service that we provide. I think they know that you have to educate all students that show up, but I think those that are physically challenged or mentally challenged, I just don't think they think about them. And we could do a better job there in educating the people that we're going to ask to change things.
Well, and as far as 13% cap from the state level, I know that there's, in talking to other boards across the state, there is conversations about that 13% concern. And so I think that that's something that we can absolutely kind of collaborate across county. So I don't know if there's, maybe we can even work with our attorney to create a, board approval, whatever, that we support this idea all because of these different things, as removing the cap of special needs versus 13%, that we can sign and we can share with other boards so that they can sign and share with their legislators. In addition to some of the documentation, like Ms. Bradford suggested, maybe some of the unique needs that we service and provide and how we support our students.
Visually.
Yeah, but yeah.
Can I say one last
I'm
comment?
sorry, we're past the 1 o'clock mark, so I'll make a motion to continue to 1:30, but I do have a hard stop at 1:30. So I'll make a motion to continue to 1:30.
Second?
Okay, second, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Okay, passes.
And I will say that I am on a committee at the state level about weighted student formula. And we had our first meeting maybe 2.5 weeks ago. So every county, there's legislators there. There were a couple senators there.
It might be
They
a
have
unique opportunity for us
analysis.
to pilot a weighted student
Right.
formula.
Well, and they are piloting a weighted student formula for special ed, but they're going for entire district wide for that one. And so that was just the first initial meeting, and we got some presentations of, I want to say it's like, there's a school district in Tennessee that they were looking at, and there's some others that they were showing us. And so, again, it was the initial meeting, and we were all literally just, yeah, let's do it. And I got the opportunity to sit at the table. My group was with Alexis, I think it's Alexis, at the, who is the CFO for the state, for DPI. And this is a heavy weight, and it would require a lot of adjustments. So it's, just know that other districts are very much invested in. I'm going to say there's probably maybe 12 superintendents from around the state who were invited to that
Well,
meeting.
if they're looking for an opportunity to create a roundtable, I'm sure we could help facilitate that and bring people together to discuss.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
So can I just one last comment before we move to the next one? I would just say what Dr. Faust was saying, and what we're all talking about here is, it speaks to the value of what public education, public schools do, because we are required. That's something charter schools and privates don't have to do. If they don't want their student, they can just say, go, and they come back to us because they have to. So that means if we're required, then we should be funded appropriately for that reason. I mean, everybody can debate, how they feel about school choice, and that's okay. But at the same time, it's like public schools are where it's at. That's where we service everybody. And so they should keep that in mind. I mean, feds and the state folks. And, and I hate to say, I mean, local, they're carrying the burden. They're not legally bound to do. But maybe that's how it goes up the chain. We inform and we tell them, they tell them, and then they tell them. That's,
I think that's exactly how it's designed, and I think that's why it's really important for us to come together and have these conversations, to then in turn around and have these conversations and be better equipped, because I know that we all have our own personal opinions, and the reality is I want what's best for all kids. And I'm not going to put blame on any parent for doing what's best for their child. So our job as facilitators in the public school system is looking at ways to make it better. And that's what we're going to continue to do to our best of our ability, understanding that there's a lot to climb. There's a big mountain to climb. But yeah, so there's a few more on this list. The number 10 is a pretty straightforward one, just funding in the arrears annual funding model versus next year's projected enrollment, utilizing the year before. That looks like it's going to pass, but just an outward support of that as well. I know we've talked about this quite a bit, so committee members, do you have any questions about that one? And number 11, the Isaac Bear Early College High School building. This is a unique opportunity, again, I think, with our district, because this is a collaboration with UNCW, working with our county commissioners, potentially even private donors to make this happen for our students. But the state did allow for us finances to draft, and we have a model built. As far as I know, UNCW is still on board to put the land, and so I think this is a unique opportunity to keep that door open. You were on the committee with that as well. So I don't know when the last time that they've met.
So
but-
Hugh and I think the committee for some reason disappeared, the ad hoc committee. It was, I don't know how that happened, but it just disappeared. Hugh and I were on it. We'd had meetings with Chancellor Sardelli, he's gone now. But we did meet with Eddie on Zoom, and then, I'm not sure who the other lady was, but we got to look at the plan, and we got to look at the model, and maybe you can speak to that a little bit if y'all haven't seen it. It's beautiful.
So, as you know, the state funded the advanced planning process.
Right.
So we entered an MOU, the funding went to UNCW, not to the school system.
Mhm.
We entered an MOU with UNCW, had a really great working relationship, really enjoyed the opportunity to work with them through the entire process. We hired a design team, had a lot of planning meetings, a lot of community input, staff, students, and we developed almost to, I would say, developed up to schematic design level. And so, because the money went to UNCW, the advanced planning document, the final document, had to go to state construction for review. The architect submitted that. We got comments back. We addressed the comments. Ultimately, state construction approved it. And then everything, we're to the point where we would like to finish the design and move into the construction phase. But I think the holdup at this point is how construction of that building would be funded. And no one has a real answer. It's unique because it would be a building that sits on property that is owned by UNCW. So I think there's some challenges to funding for that. Personally, I think the only way that I think what you said is probably the best way to get that funded. There needs to be a partnership, county, state, school system, that would come up with a funding mechanism that was agreeable to everyone.
Eddie, do you remember the cost then? I mean, I know it's probably different now, but
So the original cost, well, the cost in the advanced planning document was 45 to 50 million. That's a pretty high number, and I personally think that could be scaled back to 40 million easily.
Well, and I'm wondering too, if this is a unique one in my opinion, because it is a big cross collaboration between our county, UNCW, and us, and really the opportunity for private donors here. I mean, this is, since it's not a school building, they're going to have different things that they have to go through as far as that goes, but the design is already built. There might be interest in the community and builders that might want to help donate some of that. So I think, I would like to see this stay on with the intent of maybe bringing together those entities, UNCW, the county, and us, to kind of have those collaborations and see where it goes from there.
Typically, colleges have naming rights for buildings, and it comes with a big chunk of change in the donation. Since it's college, it's on the college campus, that might be a way to get.
Yeah, I don't want to overspeak here, but I'm saying I think that this, for us, is unique. It would allow us to service double the amount of students that we currently are, closer to 400, correct? As for what I remember from when I saw the plans.
Correct. I know
I'm
it was
thinking-
an increase. I can't remember the exact numbers.
I want to say it was close to double, because I was like that creates an opportunity for a lot of our students. I mean, and this is what we're about. And so to know the trajectory change and being able to double that of who you're serving in a 10-year span is going to look, I mean, it's huge, so.
I have a follow-up question.
ma'am.
So we signed that agreement, and I know that was either last year or there's an expiry date on it, correct?
There is, I'll have to find out what that date is.
Yeah.
And the expiration date was tied to UNCW updating their master plan, and it's coming up. Maybe next year or the year after. I know it's very close. But they wanted that date, so when they began their master plan process, they knew whether or not Isaac Bear was going to be on that site.
When was that date?
So I think it's on Assembly somewhere. I'm trying to remember the month we did it, we signed it. I'm not sure if it's this board or the previous board.
I don't remember it, so probably the previous.
Yeah, it's pretty long and it's very detailed about, when it expires. And I can't remember if there was like money involved, like we pay $1 or, I don't know. I'll have to look it up. I know that sounds crazy, but I think it's on Assembly.
I think you're right. We would pay $1 lease
Right.
to utilize the building once it's built.
It's pretty common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
But it's more involved than that.
The only concern is, I know it's a different pot of money, but in the public's perception, New Hanover. We're improving something that's not in this poor shape. Granted, it's not in outstanding shape, and that the building is aging, or that trailer is aging.
Oh, they're awful.
But there's New Hanover, so we have to be very sensitive to that.
Ms. Bradford, I agree with you. I think as far as our capital needs, that's a separate we actually have a capital committee.
Yep.
And I think it would be smart for the board to have a 3-year plan and discuss not only the facility needs, but the capacity needs, and then come together with the county and talk through what that dollar amount is, because it's a big dollar amount. And so really to prepare ourselves for a bond or however they want to help support funding this, because that's a whole different conversation. We could go on for hours about that. We're not going to.
I just don't want to.
So potentially marking this one off, and that's fine.
No.
but-
You
mark
could just
it off.
potentially put a 13 on there and say, we're not overlooking New Hanover, but that's a whole separate issue, and but you can't have the conversation. I don't think right now, even though up in the northern part of the county we want to have the conversation, I don't think you can have a conversation about infrastructure, capital improvements without talking about New Hanover at the same
How
time.
about this? What if we add a capital 3-year plan and say, part of one of the things that we think is we really need to come together and prioritize for 3 years, so that then this is really more a local thing. But if we add that, just saying, that's not really going to be state, I guess kind of ties in maybe a little bit here with the lottery funding and increase of that. But just to acknowledge that we as a board need to have that better communication as
Well, I would say
guaranteed
it's
funding.
definitely tied into the state in regards to, I know our senator got the initial money for it, and because it's on UNCW property, which is that considered state? So state has to be in this conversation, and
Yeah.
if we can coincide that with the bond discussion, because if we have to come up with some of it, or the voters or whatever on a bond, then the state has to be part of it because it is on their property and essentially will own the building.
So state, UNCW, and local, as far
Yeah.
as if we move forward and having these conversations, those are the
The
three
UNCW
entities.
is the state, they're the state entity,
But I'm saying our local, I was
Right.
implying the county commissioners,
yeah.
as far as that.
I have one follow-up question, if you don't mind. The trailers, those ones were there from like 18 years ago?
The trailers they were brought in new.
Right.
But, they are not in very good condition. The memorandum that we have with UNCW does expire in 2027.
Okay.
So it's roughly 3 years, 1 month.
So that might be a good timeline.
Ooh, yeah, 3 years, definitely, we better have a 3-year plan.
I would say within that time frame, if we do not have a plan for a new building, we definitely need a plan for those.
Oh, we can't put them back in
They
trailers.
will need to be replaced.
Okay.
and I appreciate that. So 12 is calendar flexibility. We already have a board resolution for this, but just keeping that in the forefront. And then I added a 13, a capital 3-year plan for the board to consider the needs of facility and
Ms. Barnhart,
capacity.
as far as that's concerned, we do have a capital committee, and
Yeah.
if we want to, we can convene a
Joint
meeting
with
and
them.
with legislators, if they wanted to just talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I just was saying, that was something we'd address here, so we can bring it before the board. And Dr. Faison, number one, we kind of skipped over, and you're back here now, so I'm going to look at the allotment. Is there a need for an allotment MTSS coordinator? And I said specifically focus in pre-K or elementary in Title I.
Can I just go back to calendar flexibility and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
make sure, I just want to make sure the board is aware of HB 86, and that's the bill where we can request there's 10 districts that can request extra days, and I know I just want to make sure you are aware of that. I know you are. And we talked about this, but it's out there, and I want to make sure everybody understands that with that, you can request those extra days, and people have talked about that, but they do not count towards the regular school days. So let me back up, because it seems like we've talked about it before, and it looks like I see some questions. So that is when we talked about that there's districts that can request to start the school calendar year early, but because that's what I thought you were talking about when you said calendar flexibility. They can start the school year early, but with that request, they do not count towards the extra school days. They don't count towards the school days. So it does not count towards the 125, the 185, or the 1025. So I just want to make sure that, I'm sorry, because it just threw me off, because that's what I thought you were talking about. So I didn't make myself clear with that.
Calendar flexibility as far as the state statute that has the requirement of start and end time.
Yeah. I apologize, because that's where my mind was with that.
Can I ask you a follow-up, Jason? I just wanted to confirm if it's true, because I'd heard this, that our private and charter schools don't have to abide by calendar law. Is that correct? I don't think they do.
I do not know. Does anybody know that?
Well, is charter public?
Well, they get public funds, but they
They have a lot of different flexibility, even though they are
But they don't have
public.
to abide by it, but this public schools do.
I do
was
not
just
know.
confirming, because I had been told that. I'm gonna look that up.
They have a lot of different flexibility that we do not have, so,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
I didn't know
So
if they
anyway,
did that or not.
sorry about that.
You're fine.
When I saw calendar flexibility, that's what I thought we were talking about, so I apologize. So what was your question?
So number one on the list of advocating for an allocated MTSS coordinator position, potentially a target focus in elementary and or pre-K,
Okay.
Title I.
So your
Yes, like I'm just saying, is this something a need to stay on that we want to only discuss as a board, or? I wrote this down as things for us to consider, and so I'm looking to you of saying, is this, because we currently in the allotment formula, there's not an MTSS coordinator allotment.
No.
Correct.
Currently, our coaches serve basically as MTSS coordinator, and coaching consider we don't have, that's not an allotment formula as well. So if you're asking if our schools would love that position, of course they would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and that was where kind of my thought process was. I know that a lot of schools look at it differently, and it's part of general statute. to
Yes,
have
Senate Bill
MTSS,
387. Mhm.
Interventions, but there was not an allotment for that, and so to kind of bring awareness to that to our legislators and what that looks like, either certified or classified, that can look different, but just having some sort on paper to be able to provide that support that's required in statute.
Yes, that would definitely help our schools. If they could have a person who actually was in the building dedicated to that position, because there's a lot of things that our MTSS coordinators do. It's just not academic, it's also social emotional, behavior, So when we think about that, there's a lot of things that are covered there. And it is part of, and like I said, it's covered in the law, so it's a requirement.
And I guess part of my thought process, committee members, was if we had a target focus on elementary and pre-K, maybe even, at our priority schools, Title I schools, since it's not currently an allotment, if this was a potential opportunity for us to pilot something like this, I feel like the younger focus would be better, because their early intervention, I mean, we've said it before today, but early intervention we know is going to yield better results. And so that's where I think that there would be an opportunity potentially to do that and say, it is.
So to that point, we would have to come up with some figures, right? We would have to
Yes.
come up with what it would cost to
Yes.
do this.
Are you talking about just, because keep in mind, we do MTSS in all the way up.
Correct.
Okay, so,
Correct. But I'm saying if we are trying to advocate to have an MTS coordinator everywhere, and it's currently not in the allotment, then potentially it's going to be a pitch for a pilot,
Mhm.
right? And so I would think if we wanted to do that, target focus in elementary and pre-K, but yeah, that would be the data. If the board also wants to do this, that would be the data. We would look from you to say, is this a certified person? Is this a classified person? What would it cost?
Certified
What would-
person.
Right, so, but those are all the details to hammer out.
I would like to see it for the whole county. I mean, we can take apart pre-K, but I would like to see what it would cost for the whole thing.
yeah, because right now, for example, Laney has a great program they're doing. I mean, so they actually have a program, I think they call it, let me see, Freshman Leadership Academy, because when I saw this up here, and I actually talked to Ms. Boer, who is our district MTSS coordinator for the district for the next couple of weeks, I guess, and but they have a program where they work with the freshmen, ninth graders, and they've actually seen an increase of success of 50% of those freshmen. So they actually looked at, in their flex period, they looked at the freshmen at the semester, and they saw the attendance and the grades, and they kind of paired them with teachers, and they did some mentoring, bringing in some outside guest speakers and some other things, and they really saw an increase in the freshmen with that. So think about the benefits of actually getting a freshman on target. So
Oh, yeah.
I know we like to start with the foundation, but think about the success to get a freshman back on track, because they're going
I
back
agree
into
with
the
you.
into our society.
I'm
So-
not gonna argue that point. I know that there is not currently an allotment formula, but I do like the idea of getting the numbers for each of those entities, pre-K, elementary, middle, and high school, with the acknowledgement that, they usually do not roll out full allotments for everything. So if we had a target focus, in my opinion, an elementary focus would be it, but maybe it'd be a different direction of what you're going to see. But that was something that I just wanted to bring up because I know that's in statute.
And maybe what we can do is actually talk to the staff. Let's talk to
Yes.
principals and teachers, and actually talk to the boots on the ground and see what would they suggest if we started with this. And I could bring you back what the people in the school building would actually say, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Can I just add one thing? I'm
yes.
sorry, I know we're time limited.
coming
We
up,
got
yeah.
like 1 minute. I had the opportunity on our Shadow a Principal Day to sit in on an MTSS team, and the amount of work they put in. They go through each child, they look at what they need, they look at what intervention they need, they look at their scores, their absenteeism, they look at everything. And I just think it's a great program to keep and fund if we can.
I agree.
Oh, great,
And I think
yeah.
that
On all
that's the
levels.
step before an IEP process. So if
Yeah.
we're talking, we're intervening and we're able to support students prior to needing an IEP and everything that goes along with that, I think that's something that's.
And it is in the law, so we have to keep it.
Right. We're not doing away with anything. I'm just saying it would be nice to have an allotment with that. So going through the one thing that I heard we added, and ladies, what I'm going to make the recommendation, if you guys are okay with, looking at this list, if there's anything we want to remove, we can do that. Rather than sitting and trying to prioritize in a short amount of time, I will just remove the numbers and bring all of these as ideas to advocate for to the board. It'll be in our July meeting, if you guys are okay with that. The only one, and I don't like saying this, I love the RISE Pros program, but after speaking with Ms. Barnum, it sounds like the replication process can happen in the scheduling, not necessarily at a state level, so I don't know if that's necessarily something needed to change or advocate for on a state level, but beyond that, that was my only, after having this meeting, that's my only feedback.
So can I make a suggestion? So if
Yes.
we're going to do that for July, and you're going to maybe type this up and figure out, maybe it'd be good to send some board members before our meeting, and they can rank them what they think. And then that could lead our work going forward on what we want to focus on, right?
Well, yeah, I'd like for the board to like approve it, so,
You're right.
I mean, I can, these 1 through 13, minus if we take off 3, and the
Cool.
13 being a capital 3-year plan of facility capacity need. I can send that out to board members and ask them to prioritize ranking, or work with Ms. Bowie to prioritize ranking of that, and we can vote on a formal legislative
Yeah.
agenda in July. Does
That
that
would
sound
be
like a
great.
good plan
Yeah,
moving
that
forward?
would be a good
And then
idea.
that way, our staff can work on gathering some of the data points with that, and we can come back together after the board approves.
Yeah.
Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, I'm saying the capital issue, I'll say if we can coordinate with the capital committee as well.
Oh, yeah,
That's a
yeah.
good
I'm
idea.
not making the I'm just saying it's a good idea for capital to meet and have a 3-year plan that we all
Yeah.
come together for.
Yeah, well, I was just adding that in, because that's on my notes too, to kind of, as a bullet point to do, because I think I'm on capital, I'm pretty sure.
I don't remember which one.
Yeah, I think it's me and Pete. Well, I was out of the country, so Hugh stepped in for me when I wasn't here, but I think I'm on capital this time. But regardless, I just think it's a good idea to have that conversation. Isaac Bear, Hanover is,
I agree. I don't want to pick one school over the other. I'm just saying these are different things that we've been looking through, so to follow through would be great. So, everybody, I appreciate your time, and I will make a motion to adjourn.
a second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.